Some women don't grow cold overnight. It happens slowly, like the dimming of a candle that once burned too brightly. At first, she still smiles out of habit. She still answers, still hopes, still waits. But somewhere deep beneath her chest, a soft cracking sound begins, the sound of illusion breaking. She's not angry. Not yet. Anger still means there's fire left to burn. No, this is different. This is a kind of silence that forms when a woman finally stops trying to be understood. He will notice it one morning, though he won't know what it means. Her voice will be calm, her eyes unshaken. She'll speak the same words, but they will no longer carry warmth. Her laughter, once fluid and alive, will fall like glass against marble, sharp, delicate, final. Something in her tone will tell him the chase is over, even if she's still standing right in front of him. He'll mistake the stillness for bitterness, for distance, for emotional frost. But what he doesn't see is that her soul has entered a new realm, the quiet domain of awakening. When a feminine soul becomes cold, she isn't closing herself off to life. She's simply refusing to feed illusions. She's reclaiming the warmth she once scattered in places that could not hold it. You see, the feminine heart doesn't freeze out of hatred. It freezes to preserve what's sacred. Like winter protecting the seed that must not be destroyed. The feminine coldness, it is not rejection. It is purification. It is the soul's way of saying, enough. Enough pouring into cups that only drink her dry. Enough explaining her worth to those who confuse her depth for danger. Enough translating softness into proof of loyalty. In Jungian terms, this is when the anima, the feminine soul within all beings, begins to integrate her shadow. It's when she stops projecting her inner light onto others and instead begins to hold it within herself. She once believed love was found in giving endlessly. Now, she knows love is found in returning inward. This is a feminine awakening, not in rage, not in revenge, but in stillness. The cold she embodies now is not emotional death. It's rebirth, the rebirth of discernment, the sacred separation between what feeds her and what drains her. To the man, it feels like loss. He will replay their moments in his mind. The laughter, the softness, the way she used to look at him as if he were home. Now, her gaze doesn't reach him. It's not cruel, it's distant. Not dismissive, simply detached. He will try to awaken the warmth again. Jokes, messages, apologies. But the spell is broken. She no longer responds from the same wound that once needed to be healed by him. He doesn't realize that he's not speaking to the same version of her anymore. The woman he knew was built from longing. This one, from truth. The former loved to be chosen. The latter chooses herself. And that shift is irreversible. The coldness is the in-between, between who she was and who she is becoming. A sacred pause between endings and beginnings. It's what Jung called the tension of opposites, the space where transformation hides. Because the feminine soul doesn't awaken in sunlight, she awakens in shadow. Not through being adored, but through being forgotten. Not through being held, but through realizing she can stand alone. In her silence, something ancient moves through her veins. The memory of every woman who ever dimmed her light to be loved. The ancestral echo that says, "You were never meant to beg to be seen." And so she withdraws, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. When she goes cold, it is not the end of her love. It's the end of her illusion. The illusion that warmth must always be given, that empathy must always forgive, that love must always mean surrender. Her detachment is not punishment. It's prophecy, because when a woman detaches, reality begins to rearrange itself around her boundaries. Those who once fed on her openness will fade. Those who can meet her depth will rise. This is the alchemy of awakening, where pain becomes perception, and heartbreak becomes initiation. She is learning to see, not through emotion, but through awareness. Her heart no longer pleads. It observes. Her body no longer leans in. It listens. Her soul no longer cries out for connection. It creates its own stillness and calls it peace. You might think she has become cold because she has lost her capacity to love. But in truth, she has simply refined it. Her love is no longer for those who confuse presence with possession. It is now for truth, for alignment, for the sacred in herself. This coldness is her initiation into the self, what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the parts she once denied. She no longer chases warmth outside of her, because she has realized that true warmth comes from within. And in this realization, she becomes something he will never forget, not because she belonged to him, but because she finally belonged to herself. There is a silence that follows every awakening, a silence heavy with the truth of what is finally seen. For the man, that silence feels unbearable. For the woman, it feels holy. He begins to feel her absence, even while she's still there. The text she used to send, lighter, gentler, now seemed deliberate, sparse, minimal. The way she once filled the space between them with warmth now turns into still air. Her absence starts to haunt him like a mirror he never meant to look into, because she was never just a woman to him. She was a reflection of everything he wanted to be, everything he feared he wasn't, and everything he denied existed within him. Jung once wrote that we meet ourselves time and time again, in 1,000 disguises on the path of life, and that is what she was for him, his own soul disguised as another. When she stops giving her energy, his unconscious begins to tremble. The illusion that she was there to complete him dissolves. He realizes, too late, that she was never his possession. She was his projection. Every man carries within him a hidden image, the anima, the feminine soul that he seeks in the outer world. When undeveloped, he doesn't recognize her as part of himself. He looks for her in women instead, hoping one might heal his emptiness, validate his worth, soften his hard edges. And when he found her, he thought he had found the source. He mistook her empathy for devotion, her care for permanence, her intuition for obligation. But what he didn't see was that she wasn't mirroring his wholeness. She was mirroring his lack. Every wound he denied, every fear he buried, every mother shadow he avoided, they all came alive in her presence. She became the stage on which his unconscious played out its drama. And when she finally stepped back, when her energy stopped feeding that hidden theater, his own shadow came into view. At first, he resists it. He calls her cold, detached, uncaring. He tells himself she's changed. But what he's really saying is this. She no longer plays the part one casts her in. When a woman awakens, she breaks not just her own illusions, but the illusions projected onto her. The man feels it as loss, but it is the loss of his reflection, not of her. She doesn't hate him. She simply refuses to be the container for his unhealed self. And this is where the true tension begins. The dance between awakening and abandonment, between detachment and desire. He still feels drawn to her warmth, but now he senses that her warmth belongs to something greater than him, to something sacred, internal, unreachable. It unnerves him. It makes him crave her more, because the feminine in her has become what the unconscious in him yearns for. Wholeness. In Jungian language, this is a confrontation with the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains all that is repressed or denied. For him, her silence exposes his. Her boundaries reveal his dependency. Her detachment mirrors his inner void. And so, while she is awakening, he is unraveling. He starts to wonder why her absence echoes louder than her presence ever did. Why he can't move on. Why no other woman feels the same. He doesn't realize. It was never her he couldn't let go of. It was the mirror she held to his soul. Meanwhile, she walks through her own night. Don't mistake her coldness for serenity. It is often born of deep sorrow. To withdraw her energy is to confront her own shadow too. Because the feminine is not only love, she is chaos. She is death and rebirth. She is creation and destruction intertwined. When she stops giving, she must face the ache of no longer being needed. She must release her addiction to being the healer, the understanding one, the emotional anchor. In her silence, she meets her own ego, the part that believed she could fix what was never hers to fix. And this meeting is excruciating, because to awaken, A woman must also dismantle her savior complex. There's a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when she realizes she doesn't want to be understood anymore. She wants to be free. Free from the emotional loops, the constant decoding of another's moods, the exhaustion of proving her goodness through patience. She no longer wants to carry the relationship in her nervous system. She wants peace that doesn't depend on being needed. And so, the cold deepens, not as punishment, as purification. Her stillness becomes sacred space, the void through which she can finally hear her own soul again, to the outer world. It looks like she's closed her heart, but inside, her heart is finally expanding, not outward toward others, but inward toward herself. This is the path Jung called individuation, the integration of all that was fragmented. The feminine becomes her own axis, no longer orbiting around love, but around consciousness. Her awakening is a slow unraveling of every illusion that set her worth dependent on how much she could give. Now she gives nothing, and yet, for the first time, she feels full, because she understands love that requires depletion is not love. It's self-abandonment disguised as devotion. He sees this transformation and doesn't know what to do with it. The woman who once leaned and has leaned back, the woman who once sought connection now seeks stillness. Her gaze no longer asks, it knows, and that knowing terrifies him, because she now sees not just him, but through him, through his charm, his ego, his projections. She sees the boy beneath the man, the boy who feared rejection so deeply that he learned to control affection, the boy who mistook power for safety. And in her seeing, he feels naked, not because she judges him, but because she no longer plays his game. Her silence dismantles his defenses in ways words never could. He begins to crave her energy again. But now, she guards like sacred fire. This is the moment when the dynamic shifts entirely. The power he once felt, the power of being adored, needed, chased, fades into the air between them. She is no longer available for his unconscious hunger. She has become sovereign. Her energy, once scattered in longing, is now consolidated, grounded within her body. And this new energy is gravity. It pulls, but not by effort, by essence. This is the paradox of the awakened feminine. The more she withdraws, the more powerful her presence becomes. Not because she withholds to manipulate, but because she embodies what he cannot yet face. His own emptiness. Her coldness is a mirror to his unconscious. And if he's brave enough, he will not chase her warmth. He will follow the mirror instead. He will turn inward. He will begin to meet his own anima, his own neglected inner feminine. He will learn to hold himself the way she once did, with patience, tenderness, and truth. Only then can he approach her again, not as a seeker of warmth, but as one who carries his own. There is a peculiar stillness in her now, not the kind that comes from indifference, but the kind that follows revelation. She no longer seeks to be understood, because she has finally understood herself. The woman who once poured endlessly now guards a cup. The woman who once soothed everyone else's storms now lets the thunder roll through her in silence. This is not bitterness. This is initiation. It is the stage where her soul reclaims what she gave away too freely, her time, her tenderness, her psychic energy. Her body begins to remember its sacred function, not to serve, not to fix, but to feel. Every boundary she once hesitated to draw now forms naturally, like rivers finding their rightful course back to the sea. There's no fight left in her, only clarity. The man feels this as distance. But to her, it is sacred geometry. It is alignment. It is the architecture of self-respect rebuilding itself from the ashes of exhaustion. She starts to notice how quiet her nervous system feels when she no longer explains herself. The ache of constantly being misunderstood dissolves into a strange peace. Even loneliness, which once felt unbearable, now feels like freedom, because it's hers. Her solitude is no longer punishment. It's prayer. The feminine soul, once conditioned to define herself through the reactions of others, now begins to exist for no audience. She becomes both the question and the answer. She stops performing love and begins embodying it, not as attachment, but as awareness. This is the transformation that Jung called individuation, the return of a psyche to its own center after living too long in the orbit of another's unconscious needs. To the outside world, it looks like she has grown cold, but within, the fire has simply changed direction. It burns inward now, refining, purifying, illuminating. She is learning the rarest art of all, how to hold her warmth without leaking it. No longer does she give to prove her goodness. No longer does she pour to earn affection. Her love becomes a frequency, not a transaction. She realizes that to give her energy to someone who cannot receive it is to betray her own soul. This revelation does not come gently. It shatters her illusions the way light pierces through stained glass. Beautiful but devastating. Every pattern of overgiving begins to crumble. Every subtle manipulation, disguised as compassion, is revealed. She sees the ways she tried to earn love through self-erasure, and her heart weeps, not for the man, but for the girl who thought she had to. Her awakening is not loud. It happens in quiet rooms, in sleepless nights, in the pause between one text and the next. It happens when she stops explaining, stops chasing, stops trying to make her worth legible. The woman who once feared losing him now fears losing herself again. And so, she withdraws not as retreat but as return. She returns to her body, to her breath, to the rhythm of her own intuition. There's a new light in her eyes, not soft but steady. It is not the light of romance. It is the light of recognition. The same energy that once sought to nurture is now turned toward creation. She begins to build a world around her, one that doesn't require her diminishment. Meanwhile, the man feels the shift like a void. Her silence becomes unbearable. He cannot name it, but he feels it. The way her absence reveals the smallness of his own spirit. He begins to notice that no other woman carries that same quiet gravity. They smile, they flirt, they try to fill the space. But they do not see him the way she did, because she once saw not his ego but his essence. And now that she is gone, he realizes he cannot see himself without her mirror. He begins to crave not her affection, but her reflection, the way she made him feel more real, more alive, more seen. But she is no longer reflecting him. She has turned the mirror inward, and this is where the real alchemy begins. The feminine withdrawal is an act of sacred rebellion. It is not cruelty. It is creation through destruction. By withdrawing her energy, she collapses the unconscious contract that once bound them. I will give so you may feel whole. Now, that agreement burns. The ashes left behind become the soil for a new kind of relationship, one rooted not in dependency, but in truth. Her silence speaks the language of boundaries that words could never articulate. She no longer needs to defend herself. She no longer needs to justify her feelings. The man who truly sees her won't need an explanation. He will recognize her stillness as strength. And for the one who doesn't, her silence is the answer. She learns to find beauty in withdrawal. The same way the moon hides itself to renew. The same way winter strips the trees. So spring can breathe again. The coldness people speak of, it isn't cruelty. It's her chrysalis. It's the sacred stage where she gathers her power back into herself. Every emotion that once spilled outward now condenses into knowing. She understands now that love without awareness becomes servitude. Compassion without boundaries becomes self-betrayal. Warmth given to the undeserving becomes self-depletion. So, she becomes a guardian of her own flame. She no longer gives her warmth away as an offering to those who fear the fire. Instead, she carries it quietly within her, like a secret temple. Those who once took her softness for granted begin to feel the absence of its glow. He especially. For the man, this silence becomes a haunting echo. He remembers her laughter, not as sound, but as atmosphere. He remembers her eyes, not as color, but as clarity. And in the space where she used to be, he feels a strange stirring, not of longing, but of reckoning. He begins to see the truth she carried all along. That love cannot save the one who refuses to meet himself. He sees that her detachment was a rejection. It was revelation. She didn't leave him because she stopped loving. She left because she finally started seeing. Her awakening becomes his invitation. But not all men accept it. Some flee from the discomfort of her transformation. Others try to pull her back into the old roles, the nurturer, the mirror, the muse. But she no longer fits there. The woman who has met her own darkness cannot return pretending light. She no longer performs softness to earn belonging. Her compassion has matured. It no longer feeds illusions. It liberates. And so she becomes a woman who is remembered not for how she made them feel, but for what she made them face. When the feminine soul becomes cold, she doesn't hate you. She simply stops warming what refuses to awaken. She becomes like the mountain, unmoving, eternal, carved by storms, yet never conquered by them. Her love, once flowing outward like a river, now sinks deep into the earth, unseen but alive. Those who once mistook her silence for absence will one day understand. She didn't disappear. She transcended. The silence between them was no longer an absence. It had texture now, like frost on glass. Every word he didn't say formed a thin layer over her heart, translucent yet solid, and she, no longer seeking warmth, began to see beauty in the ice. Once, she thought love meant melting for another. Now, she saw how that very softness had drowned her clarity. Her gentleness had been mistaken for endless permission. Her empathy had become a playground for projection. She didn't hate him. She had simply outgrown the version of herself that needed to be seen through his eyes. That's what coldness really is for the feminine soul. Not cruelty, not vengeance, not bitterness, but awakening, a sacred reclamation of sight. She begins to see, not through fantasy, but through reality, not through what he could be, but what he is. When a woman becomes cold, it's because the illusion has melted instead. Her warmth doesn't flow toward the same direction anymore. It returns inward. That inward current, that turning of her gaze back to her own center, is the beginning of individuation, Jung's sacred path of becoming whole. She no longer mirrors his wounds. She no longer translates his silence into stories. She no longer offers her intuition as his compass. The spell breaks, and with it, her attachment dissolves. In the depths of her awakening, she discovers the most unsettling truth. She never truly loved him. She loved the version of herself that existed when she believed she could save him. That was the illusion. That was the projection. For what she called connection was often the dance of her inner child, trying to earn safety through emotional labor. What she called chemistry was a magnetic pull of unhealed wounds meeting in symmetry. What she called devotion was often self-abandonment disguised as loyalty. Now she sees. And seeing changes everything. Because awareness, once it blooms, cannot be unlearned. It's not that she no longer feels. It's that she no longer confuses pain with passion. Her body, her intuition, her energy, they begin to rebel against the old patterns of chase and surrender. He notices it, not in her words, but in her energy. The warmth he once took for granted now feels distant, sacred, untouchable. He reaches for her, but his hand meets only air. And in that void, he encounters himself, his own shadow. The emptiness he once escaped through her affection. Now, without her emotional light to bathe in, he must face the chill of his own disconnection. She doesn't rejoice in his pain. She simply observes. Because awakening isn't revenge, it's revelation. She sees the full spectrum of what was, and she no longer needs to fix, heal, or soften it. Her boundaries become silent prayers. Her distance becomes devotion to truth. Her coldness becomes clarity. And yet, beneath that stillness, there is an ancient tenderness, not for him, but for herself, for the woman who once tried so hard to be enough, for the girl who mistook chaos for love, for the heart that finally, mercifully, learned how to close without becoming cruel. Stillness replaces the storm. The mind stops bargaining. The heart stops begging. The soul begins breathing again. That's what awakening feels like. Not a victory, not a declaration, but a quiet surrender into reality. It's cold, yes, but it's clean. It's pure. It's her. She becomes what Jung called the self, the wholeness that integrates shadow and light, the inner union of animus and anima, the balance between empathy and sovereignty. And that is why men never forget the woman who becomes cold, because her stillness exposes her noise. Her absence reveals their dependency. Her silence mirrors their chaos. It's not her body he misses, it's her presence. The calm that once absorbed his storms. The understanding that once softened his edges. The energy that once carried what he refused to hold. But she no longer carries what is not hers. That is the essence of awakening. To love without losing oneself. To give without bleeding. To stay open without being consumed. The feminine soul doesn't stay cold forever. Coldness is not her destination. It is her bridge, a sacred winter before the spring of selfhood. When she emerges again, she will love, but differently. Her love will no longer beg to be recognized. It will recognize itself. Her eyes will no longer search for home in another. They will see home everywhere she stands. The warmth will return, but this time it will belong entirely to her. And that is the moment she becomes unforgettable, not because she loved him, not because she stayed, but because she woke up. The woman who walks away in silence isn't cold. She's finally at peace. She's not shutting the world out. She's returning home to herself.